Another major question that springs to mind, having read the publication, seeing your research and others' research, is the vast majority of human beings globally like the idea of hybrid. With regards to workers that need to be creative and collaborate with colleagues and clients, can you think of a reason as to why it's good to have people at home 1 or 2 days a week, for example? Because I can't.
Well, I can, but at the moment the problem is that we have hybrid. Hybrid will be the buzzword of 2022, without question. Every business article you will read will have a reference to hybrid working somewhere in it, I guarantee you. The problem is it's lacking definition and it's a very blunt instrument. So what we're seeing is, rather than organisations saying, although some have, we want you all back in the office, they've pushed the button on hybrid and said that we'll enable you to work a variation of 2 days in the office, 3 at home, or vice versa, generally. The problem with that is it's a uniform approach applied to everybody, when not everybody's job's the same, and everybody's needs are slightly different. So as a result, what I think you're going to see over the course of this year is lots of talk about hybrid, companies starting to try and implement hybrid, and then realising that they enter into a world of pain because it actually doesn't work for them, and it increasingly doesn't work for their people. I think what we're likely to see in the more, if you call it best-in-class practice, would be that businesses actually take a long, hard look at their staff today and the staff requirements of the future, and profile those staff, understand the jobs they do, and the geography that they need to operate in as a consequence, and then start to implement that. The problem with that is, of course, it's much more complex to do that. If you've got 200 people that you need to profile and you end up with, let's say, 10 different types of worker, and therefore 10 different kinds of arrangement, it's much more difficult than the traditional command and control culture that the office has been a manifestation of. So we're going to be at a bit of a turning point at some point in the near future, which is, do we revert back to type and start a strong command and control mentality? Or do we start to personalise the workplace, not on a blanket 2 to 3 days a week hybrid relationship, but on a personalised relationship on the basis of what people do? Let's take our own business as a quick example. If you're a leasing agent, you need to be in the market. There's no question about that. You cannot do your job if you're not in the market. So as a consequence, I think those type of staff would absolutely be 5 days a week in and out of the office transacting. I, on the other hand, write research reports for a living and then present them. But when I'm writing them, I need quiet. And sometimes I get that quiet from a different environment than the office, or from a different part of the office that provides that, which is the other thing that people forget. So as a result, we do need, it's a sort of horses for courses approach. But it's a question mark over whether management of businesses want to go down that route of managing complexity or managing generality. Historically, it's been the latter route. I think the more productive route for people and for business is managing the complexity, but time will tell if we get there.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, and when we can speak about command and control, the flip side is we can also speak about offering people, let's say, a post-COVID concept. We've recently refurbished our offices here, as you know, that would allow for quiet space for you to write your report, collaborative space. It also depends on each city, the public transport offering it has. Madrid is a city where people can normally get into the office fairly swiftly, which I know in the UK may be very different, as some people have to commute an hour and a half each way.
56 minutes is the average commute
well, there
time
you go.
into London.
It's probably about 26 minutes here. So it is interesting. I also think there are certain disadvantages to telling people, and I know it's not what you're advocating, you've got to stay at home a couple of days a week. I've got colleagues and friends that have to stay at home a couple of days a week. Well, maybe their home situation or where they live or the apartment they live in isn't suitable to be fully productive, and they'd actually much rather be in the office. So I would agree that it's a difficult subject because hybrid is then going to lead to people saying that they're being unfairly treated, and so there are all sorts. just with regards to your findings, because I know we did a major survey, you've done a major survey in many countries on occupier demands and requirements and preferences. What for you was interesting when you saw the Madrid or the Spain results? What was different to what you're used to in the UK and other countries?
Yeah, so just for context, we interviewed or surveyed 300, almost 400 global corporate real estate leaders, 55 of whom were based in Spain. So their responses were about their business, but they were not necessarily just their Spanish real estate, just to be clear, but people that are grounded in the Spanish market and are based here. What we found, I mean, essentially mirroring to a large degree the global findings, but with some statistical quirks, was a couple of things. One, cost drivers from the Spanish respondents were much less significant than globally.
Interesting.
So it doesn't appear that and this plays back to my point about compromise on grade B space and that sort of stuff. It doesn't seem that occupiers in the Spanish market are as transfixed with cost, real estate cost, as in other markets. Linked to that, we've seen a greater desire from Spanish occupiers to de-densify their occupation. So actually to be a little bit more liberal with the space they offer people. Part of that might be linked to new working styles, of course, but it's a natural reaction that we've seen out of the pandemic. If you think the pandemic was about surface transmission and then latterly airborne transmission and proximity of people, we had social distancing. Some of that is going to last into how we fit our office space and how close we put desks together. And the Spanish respondents seem to be much more comfortable with de-densifying than others. And then there's some sort of commonalities, the slight differences in the statistics, but essentially what we're seeing, flight to quality, flight to flexibility, and flight to amenity. All things that we've already discussed, but I think that seems to be alive and well in the Spanish market as well as everywhere else.
Great, thank you. Let's gaze into the crystal ball. 3 years' time, when hopefully this whole thing is over and I'm not going to say forgotten, but a thing of the past. There are obviously two schools of thought. Some people think there's going to be more square meters per person because of the reasons you've just mentioned. Others believe that we'll be in better space with better experience, better amenities, slightly more crammed in, but nicer offices. We've seen a net negative take-up, disappointingly, in Madrid, which means that people are reducing their space, or at least over the past 12 months. What do you think is going to be the outcome? Are we going to see, for 100 people, are we going to see more square meters in 3 years' time per person or less square meters?
I'll answer that in two ways. So the first way is that I think if you look at corporate footprints, we're going to see a plus or minus 10% change in the scale of those footprints, the quantum of space that they hold. As people and companies start to adopt new working practices and take a flight to quality. We heard a lot of scare stories early in the pandemic about occupiers reducing portfolios by 40% because everybody was going to be working remotely, etc. I don't see any of that materialising. There will always be an outlier somewhere that props that up and be used as a proof point. The generality of the market is a plus or minus 10% quantum in terms of footprint. The other point I'd make though is that we need to start getting away from, because occupiers are starting to get away from thinking about square foot per person. Because irrespective of whether you go hybrid or the more customized version that I've talked about, I think we will have people having a more flexible and fluid relationship with the office. And I think actually a more meaningful metric for office occupancy going forward will actually be footfall, which has traditionally been a retail measure. I think actually success for a landlord and indeed for an occupier is getting more people using the building, and footfall rather than how much space each individual gets who may not be using the space is going to be far more valuable. And what that actually does is plays to potentially some of the themes in the report around smart technology and the use of mobile technology in particular, start to understand that dynamic and how people are engaging with space, which parts of space they're engaging with, so that you can actively curate the environment and the experience you're presenting.